So yeah, another thing about people taking their own lives at Bethel. I think it happened 3 times with 3 different guys while I was there. I didn't know them personally, um, but we all know each other, and we're only like 1 or 2 degrees away from each other. So you always knew eventually you were going to get the truth, somewhat. Um, and unfortunately, it did happen at least 3 times while I was there, and you're always super shocked because usually it's somebody your age. You're like, oh my god, what happened? And you want to know because you're scared because like, is there something going on? Is it like affecting 20-year-old guys? Um, so one of the reasons why you would know it was someone had taken their own life is because they didn't have a funeral service at Bethel and they were not buried there. That kind of is like shitty because if you did die honorably at Bethel, you would get a funeral service at Bethel and you would be buried at Walk Hill. And so when that didn't happen, usually it's because one of 2 reasons. One, you didn't want it, like you requested it, which was very rare. Um, and then it's because you took your own life. So yeah, on at least 3 separate occasions, I believe that happened. Um, that was terrible. But again, it just goes back to the amount of stress that people are under on a regular basis. Now, a lot of times, guys would just say, you know what, I fucked up, and I don't want to go through all this shaming. I'm just gonna leave. A lot of times, guys would just pack their shit up and go. You would wake up one morning and your roommate would be gone, and he would just go home, and he would just like, yeah, I'm gonna do my shit at home. I'll see you guys later. That happened a lot in Brooklyn because we were right next to the governing. We were, next door. We lived with the governing body, so we didn't want that shit. Um, we had the saying then that Brooklyn makes the rules, Walk breaks the rules, and Patterson enforces the rules. I think that was the saying. Even though Patterson was wild, some of the craziest stories of people doing stuff came out of Patterson. They were nasty, man. Like, ugh. Um, but like, yeah, I've said before, like that if we used to say there's nothing to do in Patterson, so they just do each other. They were freaks. Um, so that was a big thing. And then on the other token, dealing with pornography, 15 guys a week. The statistic was 15 guys a week were talking to the branch committee about jerking off and all that kind of stuff, and that was a legitimate statistic. And they so what they would do a lot in laundry and building services and food services, they would again separate the single guys, young single guys, and they would have a big meeting with all of us, and they go through pretty much like a local needs, but like a really nasty local needs, where like brothers, we have to stop watching pornography. Brothers, we have to stop touching ourselves. Brothers, we have to stop misogynizing the sisters. We can't have sisters in our room. And the rule was like you couldn't have a sister or a member of the opposite sex in your room um, by yourself with the door closed. That was the only rule. You had to have the door open. Okay, great. If you know anything about Bethel and how it's structured, like physically indoors, um, people walk past your room all the time, your apartment, or whatever you want to call it, your studio. And so, yeah, anybody, if they saw your door was open and, they heard a girl's voice and stuff, whatever, then anybody could walk in and just, say how things are going. Okay. So that was the rule. So it was weird. Like Bethel was weird. Like they would give you a good amount of trust and leeway, at the same time, not. So as you were there for a while and people started to know who you were and you had kind of like this good reputation, really you were just good at ducking and dodging. Because that's the thing. There were so many rules. You had to get good at ducking and dodging. If you had gotten good enough at ducking and dodging and you had a good reputation in the Bethel streets, you can kind of get away with a lot of stuff. So, you know, I knew a guy. I knew a couple stories. One time, a guy brought his girlfriend in overnight, and his roommate was there the whole night. Now I knew it, but I didn't say anything. All I knew was there was this girl there who was there the night before, who was there early the morning. Now the thing was, it was either Gilead graduation or annual meeting. Now Gilead graduation was when everybody brought their girlfriends to Bethel. They would get their girlfriends into Gilead graduation. It was less. You could have less if you had less. It cost less seniority to have a Gilead graduate. I'm sorry. It cost less seniority to have a guest pass for someone to come watch Gilead graduation with you than it did to have a guest pass for annual meeting. So a lot of guys who have been there a long time, will bring their girlfriends in for a Gilead graduation program. And so you'd see a lot of guys would announce the fact that they were dating during that time period. And usually at Bethel, if you have been there 5 plus years, you were kind of safe with dating. You could start dating. You know, you could possibly stay and reapply as a couple if you want to get married or whatever. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on during that time period. And so I remember a guy had a girl in his room, his girlfriend overnight in his room. Now, mind you, his roommate was there the whole time. But yeah, she definitely was there overnight. And it's expensive in New York City. So, and I don't blame him. Nobody said anything. And that was the other thing is, if you knew enough people and you had a good reputation and you're partying and socializing with people, drinking with people, no one's gonna tell you because they don't want to be told on. So I didn't want you telling them about, I was loud yesterday and I had a bunch of people over my room and it was late and da da or whatever, and you didn't call the lobby and tell them that I was being too loud. So, I won't say anything about the fact that you had your girlfriend over Gilead weekend and, whatever. As long as nothing happened in my book at that time. As long as nothing happened and you had your quote unquote chaperone there the whole night, I don't really care. That wasn't the first time that something like that had happened. Another time, uh, it was a bunch of girls and guys who drank too much and they were from the outside. A bunch of sisters came, partied, um, and a lot of times you really, really get away with this. The commuters were a mess back then. So the commuters would come in and they would party with us, and most of the commuters back then were single sisters, so they would come in party with us, and sometimes they would stay over. Now they couldn't for whatever reason go home. There was snowstorm or whatever. They can get a guest room for the night, and then they would have to leave in the morning. A lot of times it didn't happen. A lot of times they just spent the night at one of their girls' houses, girls' apartments, and stayed there. And no one really said that. It was against the rules, but no one really cared about that. But sometimes, if the party was lit, um, you just knock out where you're at. And a couple times you were at a brother's place, and it was brothers and sisters in the same place, and you just woke up and just went home. Nobody said anything. Another thing that we used to say a lot of times was, "What the branch committee doesn't know won't hurt them." So if it wasn't judicial, many of us would just keep our shit to each other. We didn't say anything. I knew you had somebody, whatever. As long as it wasn't judicial, keep me out of that shit. That was the biggest thing. Was like, do not tell me about your shit. Because if you tell me about your shit, then now I have to say something. Because if it comes out that I knew, then we're all in trouble. Which did happen quite a bit. And so you had to, clear your name. You didn't want to know. You always had to have an alibi because when something went down, questions were going to be asked.